City Bookshop, and I'm here with Kevin McIlvoy and Scott Gould. We're very happy to be talking about, so Kevin prefers to go by Mac, so that's what I'll be calling him today. So Mac's new book is One Kind Favor. This is the ARC that I have right here, but it looks very similar to the paperback, which is a beautiful book, very bright and beautiful, and we love talking about it. So I'm going to introduce the authors, and then if you have questions or comments or suggestions or thoughts or anything about the book, just plug them into the chat and we'll talk about those as we go along. Scott and Mac have some questions for each other to start out with, and I think we're going to have a little reading too. So I'm going to introduce them for us. And like I said, if you have anything, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll take questions towards the end. And if you know anyone who's having trouble getting online, have them message us on Facebook or Instagram, and I'll help them log in. So no worries there. So to start us off, Kevin McIlvoy is the author of 7 previous books, 5 novels, a book of short stories, and a book of prose poetry. He is a retired Regents Professor of Creative Writing from New Mexico State University, and also recently retired from Warren Wilson College MFA program in Creative Writing. His short fiction has appeared in Harper's, Southern Review, Plowshares, Missouri Review, and other literary magazines. He has been a manuscript consultant for University of Nevada Press, University of Arizona Press, University of New Mexico Press, Indiana State University Press, University of Missouri Press, Horizon Books, and other publishers. He lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where he's joining us from today. Scott Gould's new memoir is Things That Crash, Things That Fly. It was called An Extraordinary Work by author David Shields and a delight to read by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Gould is also the author of the story collection Strangers to Temptation, which was published by Hub City Press, and the novel Whereabouts. A new collection of stories, Idiot Men, is forthcoming from Springer Mountain Press in late summer 2021, and a new novel, The Hammerhead Chronicles, is set for publication in February 2022, which is coming from the University of North Georgia Press. Gould lives in Sans Souci, South Carolina, and he teaches at the South Carolina Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities. Thank you both for joining us. We're so happy to have you, and I think I'm passing it off to Scott first.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. Hello to our very intimate gathering so far, which I see one familiar face on there. I'm so happy to be here talking with Mac about this novel, and I want to thank Hub City first off for putting this together, and Jackie, who is like the just absolute best at organizing these sorts of things. Mac, before we get into a reading and everything, I just want to say this is a gorgeous book.
Didn't the press do a beautiful job?
And I want to say first, we should give a shout to your press, to your publisher, because it's a gorgeous book, and to publish a book like this, which is, it's dealing with it grapples with a lot of different things, and for a press to give it this kind of look and everything, it's just amazing. But then I got the book and I was saying, my gosh, I love this cover. I want to see this cover. Who did this cover? And you did the art for the cover.
I did, yeah. One of my hobbies is scratch art, and all I have is those scratch art sheets that are black and they have color in the undersurface. It's a long-standing hobby of mine to do scratch art, and that piece is a piece of my scratch art called Frost Moon.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you do it for the book, or was it a piece you had that just seemed to fit with the feel of the book?
No, I did not do it for the cover. In fact, you have to probably agree with me that for a publisher to do a cover made by the author can be a pretty disastrous thing. And when I said, "Would you like to see this piece of artwork?" I said it rather fearfully, hoping that Peg Alford Purcell, the publisher editor, would be able to frankly say, no, definitely not, thank you. And instead, she liked it very much. It is a piece that was made during the time I was writing the book. And so a lot of the work that I was making was this kind of dreamlike artwork in which something like the spell of the moon figured in a lot of the work.
Yeah, this made me think of the passage, the in the swamp. It just
Yeah.
brought that to mind when I
Yeah.
as I started getting the book. And we're going to talk about the book proper. But how about, could you read a piece for us, and then
I'd
we'll
love to. I'd
start
love
talking about it?
to. I,
And do whatever kind of intro you need for the reading.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Scott, for being here. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you to Hub City for making this happen. It is wonderful as a writer to have a new book in the world and to feel the support of people for it, who are cheering for it and who believe in it. It's always hard, actually, for somebody like me who spends so many words and has all my life as a writer to find words that really actually properly say thanks. And of course, I'm really grateful to WTAW Press, as Scott was saying, for taking a chance on a book that I believe many readers will read it, and only a little ways in will feel themselves asking this question: what was WTAW thinking? And I hope in a positive way. So, yes, I would like to read just a little bit, about 7 minutes, about 3 pages of the book. And this is a part of a late chapter, chapter 33. Uh, and uh, and the best way I know to describe this is to say that on orders from Acker, who is the central figure in the novel, the proprietors of the Helltel, Bunny and the Mister, have held captive an investigating agent, Alice Bracco. An event called the Soldiers' Joy Festival is taking place in the town of Cord, only about a block away. Where is Agent Dukian? Alice asked. He's out there, said the mister. Post 9/11, when we were killed by our own collapsing twin Babels, we wanted to seem to be alive, to seem to be renewed, and seem to act righteously. That lasted 6 weeks. In the 6 years after that time, we got used to making worse everything we might have done wrong to ourselves and to everyone we liked and loved and almost loved. After the Bush years, after those years wandering the desert like a plague of scorpions pouring out over the world, we wanted most of all to openly despoil ourselves and everyone who loved us and whom we might have loved. Is Agent Dukian going to be all right? Oh dear, said the mister. No? Agent Dukian? Asked Bunny. You want to know about your bicycle, but you haven't eaten your snickerdandies. Good as pureed chicken skin, said the mister. Post all systems collapse in 2008. We wanted to seem to be alive. And we elected a president who could feel his heart beneath his hand. A flawed man, too black for some of us and not black enough for some others, but one who meant the allegiances he pledged. We felt hope. Most of us here in Cord felt real hope. Hope with an expiration date of about 6 months. By June 2009, we hated Obama, who was beyond us in his patient and decent and compassionate nature. His resistance to corruption was beyond our tolerance. His resilience was beyond our comprehension. A seeming tame sleeves rolled up street organizer, but a not your Negro pushover. We hated his darkest Africa wife for her stare right through you eyes and her muscled arms and her fierce, authentic love for her husband. We hated their undimmed, bright children, unmistakably happier than our white, bright, but dimming children. Disliking them was not enough for us in our self-despoiled fox dens. We hated their intelligence, and those perfect teeth smiles and crisp ironed clothes, even their frisky dogs, friendly, unhungry, and happy, and exuberant in the official White House photo ops. We thought of reasons to hate the new government health plan Obama proposed, and reasons to not read about or understand it. And we could have called it Republicare because all of us over 40 had seen Republicans repeatedly propose programs like it. But we named it Obamacare because naming matters to us more than reasoning or reading or understanding. We thought of reasons to hate Biden, Obama's bromantic vice president, the president's biggest fan, servant to the black on blackface overlord. Joe Biden had never tried hard enough, we felt, though we saw how he tried to be better than he was and than he had been, and we hated the grail chasing goof for trying too hard. By November 2016, we hated Obama for insisting we wait 8 years before we completely put aside all our own actual decency and our own soul deep compassion and hard earned patience and unfaked tolerance. We hated Hillary, who had threatened to make us wait another 8. Acker handed Alice a tissue for her running nose. Alice, 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 sloppy Alice, said Acker. The idea of a black man as president was so impossible for us to sustain for his entire first year. We wanted to see him killed. If that was not possible, we wanted to be killed, but killed better than on September 11, 2001, and better than on September 25, 2008, the crash date for the economic collapse. We wanted the happy, poisoned meals the gilded people live on, the supersized emoluments that go down good in your executive tower suite or on your personal country club golf cart, or protected by a fake injury from the Arlington rain in your golden four-poster bed at TV time, or with your stormy porn star companion after taking a knee at a Florida resort Cracker Graham church service you left early for a bone saw lesson with a Saudi prince. Are you listening to everything out there? Acker asked. Some of that singing and fiddle and banjo playing is pure deep purity coming out of the almost human Cordite Christian psalm book, so purty you can feel the music cleaning the air everyone breathes. When she looked more closely at Alice, who moved her limbs now as if she were enclosed in an enhanced interrogation coffin box, Acker thought, America, look at you now. The larger you make your prisons, the smaller your prison. So I'll stop there. And I hope that that gives a sense of the voice of Cord, this first person plural voice, and some sense of the context of the work.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that first person plural voice, the we and the us. Talk about that. That was about that decision to give Cord the narratorship, so to speak.
I am very influenced, have been all my life since being a very little boy, by oral storytelling. I grew up among great oral storytellers, especially on my father's side. And so I am to some degree always working from the oral tradition, and to some degree have most consciously studied in literature the oral tradition as it's represented in American literature back to its earlier manifestations in people like Washington Irving and Mark Twain. And so in this instance in which there would, I could recognize that there was a town that was in fact the central figure, that it was not primarily a character. There are multiple characters here, some of whom are more foregrounded than others. But the true central figure in this work is Gould. And for a town to have a perspective, what is very natural for this writer is to slip into this we voice. But there's another reason for it too. Since this is a voice that is speaking to its own and is to some degree, therefore, speaking to America. Gould is an American city. It is a small town that is representative of a given moment and a given kind of consciousness in 21st century America during the Trump era. It seemed very important that this be that kind of third person voice that that is spellbinding, that is meant to be casting a spell. And in the American tradition, that is a part of the tradition is the hypnotic effect of a first person plural voice.
Well, and it does that. I mean, it does that, it brings in, because it's able to go everywhere, any location, all the places where you have this large cast of characters, some live, some dead,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
getting together. With that in mind, let me ask you this. This is probably completely unfair, Mac. Okay, but the people who haven't read the book yet, who might be listening, it's so hard to summarize something like this, but what's the elevator talk for this book? Say, hey Mac, what's your latest book about? What in the world would you say for this one?
Well, that is a more impossible question for some of us than others, because what a book is about is a great question to ask someone who has primarily gone after meaning and said, here is, for instance, the meaning of our 21st century dilemma. And I am not a writer who by nature writes into meaning. I write into a state of mind that in this case is the state of mind of a place, the state of mind of a place in a particular moment. And what often seems natural to me is to write a work that enacts a state of mind on the verge of and or already experiencing kinds of madness. When I look back at everything that I have written, everything, if I were in an elevator and someone said, what is your subject matter in these 50 years of writing that you've done? I would have to say madness. I would have to say madness. My book, Little Peg, is about a person whose rage is beyond her control. She is in a state of madness in which she can't fit into the world anymore. The book that I published before this one, At the Gate of All Wonder, has a protagonist who, in an act of willful madness, has decided to permanently remove herself from the world, and it's true that what I hope happens here is that you experience the madness that is present in this place and is characterized by some of the recognizable madness that has been all around us.
Yeah, I was before preparing for this, I was reading some reviews and I preface this by saying I despise categories and how writers and books get put into categories, but everything was saying, oh, it's Kevin McIlvoy was experimental novelist, experimental this, experimental that. whereas I tend to think that any kind of piece of writing is experimenting with something in one way or another. But does that bother you? Are you okay with that? Or do you consider this an experimental novel?
I think I hold with you that any writer who is radically devoted to what the work asks of her or him is writing experimentally. And I would say that when we read books in which we feel like the directions that are the most irrational, counterintuitive, paradoxical, that the work could have drawn the author to, that the work seems to have avoided, that is a work that I would say is not experimental. I'm as much a fan of what is often called conventional fiction as anyone, because works that look very conventional have so much room in them, especially novels, for a moment that is counterintuitive, that is inherently strange, that makes you ask, how did the work go here? And how did it presume to take me there? John Berger, who is a writer I admire very much, when he has been asked by various interviewers, what do you ask for in art? He's famous for his essays about seeing. And he says, one thing I ask of in all the arts, dance, music, painting, literature, is astonishment. I want to feel astonishment. And we've all read books where we said, this is solid. I can follow this. This is good. But we never experienced astonishment, not in a moment of it, because the author did not radically commit to what the ways in which the book invited astonishment.
Speaking of astonishment, I'm constantly astonished in your work by your wordplay,
Uh,
uh, the way you play with language, and we heard some of it in the piece you read. And other than being super envious about it, and as I was sitting here, I'm at Lake Summit having a few days of vacation. I'm sitting on the dock and I'm going, hey, I don't think I could ever do that. I mean, like, but my question is that does that come in the fine tuning? Does that come naturally? Where does that come in? Is it just I was curious about the genesis of that sort of wordplay that you have. Um,
I think some of this, don't you, is just kind of hardwired, in which you can't separate who you are as a human being from who you are as an artist. I learned a long time ago that there's a theory of time that some people are monochronic and some people are polychronic. And that polychronic people can, as they're engaged in a conversation like this one in the present, be thinking about what just happened and what happened in the distant past, and at the same time be thinking about what will happen next and what might happen next beyond that. They are polychronic. They can exist in these different times all at the same moment. And then there are people who are primarily monochronic, and we are one or the other, depending on who we're talking to, on what the circumstance is, on where we are. And monochronic means that there are people who, when they are in the present, cannot actually think about what just happened, what happened in the distant past, can't actually travel their mind to what will happen next, what might happen beyond that. And I am truly a monochronic person. When I am with someone, I am so much in the present moment that it is more or less impossible for me to remember where I was only a few seconds ago. And it is utterly impossible for me to be thinking, oh, where are we going next? So that means that when I write a novel, when I write a short story, when I write anything, I am a sentence maker first and foremost. And I have this hope that the sentences are accumulating into something that will begin to identify for me what it is. And this is very like my life, in which moment by moment I feel under the spell of how marvelous life is, how darkly marvelous and how luminously marvelous life is. And I am surprised to know that I just existed in something in the past, and I'm always surprised by what comes next in the very same moment. So sentence making is the way many of us make our work. We make a sentence, we spend the time living inside that sentence before we live in the next one. And as for wordplay, I've always felt like language itself inherently is at play. That if we don't willfully turn it away from play towards meaning making, towards transactional uses of language, it by its nature transforms us. It by its nature works its magic on us through, for instance, the odd silences inside of it that are at play, through tonal shifts that are at play, that are not about going here or going there or landing there, and that language is. It rides our breath, our in breath, our out breath, and expresses the instrument of our bodies, invites the reader to be inside a different sense of the body, and puts the body in play. Language wants to do that. We have to bend it away from that to have language be something other than playful. That's what I believe, and I'm always reminded of it when I'm with a, a child who doesn't yet have words, whose expression is purely phadic, who will point at something and will make a sound, right? And is saying, "Milk, I want that milk," and or is making a sound that simply causes the child delight in his or her body. I am a monochronic. I am stuck with who I am, and I am a turtle. That is, I move inside a sentence very slowly, live inside of it for a while, then manage to move another foot, live inside another sentence for a while, etc.
Yeah. Well, I have the hardest time teaching young writers the importance of the sentence, because they see the sentence as just this thing to roll to the next sentence, and I say, well, you have to
Right,
complete the first one
right.
before you can move forward. And but I think that could be your T-shirt. I am a sentence maker first and foremost.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, one thing that I know we wanted to maybe discuss was comedy,
yeah,
because
yeah,
this book grapples with some very dark subject matter, some very emotional subject matter, and yet there's so much comedy within it, within the dialogue between the characters. And what are your thoughts on comedy within tragedy and how that all blends together for you?
Well, I did want to talk with you about this, Scott, and I know we'll just briefly talk about it here, but sometime soon, you and I know we'll talk about this, because anyone reading Things That Crash, Things That Fly, your incredible memoir, it is funny. It's funny from beginning to end, and it is about many inherently tragic things. The tragedy of unexpected divorce, the tragedy of a figure like Guilfoyle, who was ostensibly a hero in a war, but was a tragic figure in ways much more complex than simply assigned to the context of war. And I have always believed that to begin writing something comic, one has to confront and really enter the tragic. That is where you find counterintuitively what is powerful, lasting comedy, and it is it's the kind of thing that you have to trust your instincts about, because there are plenty of people who, anytime there is a tragic valence to what you are writing about, refuse to find something funny in it, even though in their lives they have often experienced the unexpected, counterintuitive response of their own bodies, which is what laughter is. Laughter is a convulsion, whether it occurs inside or outside. You don't necessarily ever control your laughter. And when you try to do that, to do a fake laugh, it always sounds like a fake laugh, right? Whereas real laughter it's the body saying, I can't deal with the two things at once: the darkness of this and the complexity of my positive emotions at this moment. So it is a commonplace experience for people at the funeral of someone that they really love, experiencing loss that is unspeakable, and finding a smile on their face that they are absolutely sure is completely inappropriate. And this is us experiencing the tragic and realizing that inside the envelope of that is the comic, and it's cuts the same way. Any inherently comic situation has inside of it tragic force. That's why we love the fools in Shakespeare, is that they are inherently comic in their behavior, inherently comic in their speech, and they are always touching on the darker things that no one else can or will speak. So I am, this is something that I definitely think on and definitely thought often about in this work.
Yeah, because in the book there's this over this town, this specter of, like you said, the present insanity, also this legacy of insanity, and yet within it, this the situations, the juxtapositions of the characters and the dialogue between them, I found myself kind of, smiling and giggling and going, and like you said, it's comedy is often best when it's unexpected. It's like, it's the comedy comes from surprise, comedy comes from juxtaposition, comedy comes from putting something in a situation where it shouldn't be and seeing
Yeah,
what happens to it. And
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
and that's
Yeah.
what happened in so many times here. I mean, uh, I'm referring again to students, but with students, students often, young writers often think it's set up punchline. It's,
Uh-huh.
you got to write a
Yeah.
joke. They've it comes from watching sitcoms or something, I guess. And the truly comedic comes from placing two things together that shouldn't belong. And
Ex-
you've got a lot of that in this book, in the scenes.
And there is a lot of that in this moment in 21st century America, in which we say, can this be possible? That the very people who were under attack January the 6th are denying that it ever happened? That the people who were trying to keep the rioters from breaking down the doors of Congress, who we have photos of standing there trying to keep them from breaking into the doors of Congress, are now saying, this never actually happened. And you can't help but feel your heart breaking, and because it doesn't fit. Some part of you has that convulsion of laughter.
Well, I want to pivot slightly to something else in this that's important in this book, and it's something I'm a complete geek about, and to the point of reading research on the brain and how it handles memory.
Mm, yeah.
I I, I think as writers, memory is one of the most valuable tools we'll ever have. And while this book concentrates on a specific period of time and a couple of specific instances, the past keeps coming in and invading the present. And this whole idea of what chord the town remembers and how it doesn't remember it. And I was just curious as how you thought about memory and how it works in this book.
When I began to recognize, and again, I never know, I mean, always for me, there's a process of discovery. Um, uh, but when I began to recognize that this was a form of sustained ghost story, this whole novel, I thought, I should study again ghost stories in various traditions. And of course, I should study the ghost story in the tradition of this region, the tradition, for instance, of Appalachian ghost stories. And I did. I took a really close look again at that. Ghost stories have always interested me because they're part of oral tradition. But I did look again at ghost stories and realize that often across all traditions, what a ghost entering your life is doing is insisting that you remember something that you are either intentionally misremembering, intentionally postponing remembering, intentionally disremembering, which is to say, willfully making sure that you do not ever call this memory up. And ghost stories they are a way of reminding a culture, don't forget, because we know you want to. And when you start to look at when ghost stories appear historically in different cultures, it is no surprise that often it's after a war. So some of the richest ghost stories in the American tradition occurred post-Civil War, and not just in the American South, but in our country in general. Where's the surprise in that? Because we had so many dead that we wanted as a nation to forget, and so that we could move on. And we had so many wounded, injured, permanently maimed people among us, like walking ghosts, who we didn't want to look at, and we didn't want to remember what that war had done to them. And so there is, once you're inside a ghost story, there's a lot to consider about the nature of memory.
Yeah, and one of the fascinating things is sometimes in this book you're not sure who's the ghost and who's not. The presences are not, you know, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. And sometimes the presences, which are your name for the ghosts in the story, are don't make their ghostly presence known
Yep.
until a certain point. So yeah, I remember um, back in the seventh grade, one of my favorite books was Ghosts of South Carolina by Nancy and Bruce Roberts. I remember who wrote it. I remember reading it cover to cover.
I
I
actually know that book.
You
Believe
do?
it or not, I actually know that book. Yeah.
And that's just, yeah, I read it and read it and read it. Um, I'm going to ask you one quick thing, and then I think, Jackie, we may want to go to questions. If anybody
Sure.
has any questions or comments or anything they want to bring up, it
Thank
doesn't
you.
have to necessarily be a question. It can just be something about anything we've discussed. Um, but uh, this is a nuts and bolts question. This is so boring, but I just gotta, when I open this book, I noticed that, between every paragraph is a space. So
Mm,
there's double spaces between all the paragraphs,
yeah.
which after a while, in my mind, it gave me just that extra split second to think about that paragraph before I moved to the next one. But
Mm.
what was the strategy behind that? It fascinated me.
I wish that all work that was voice driven had in its published form more white space. Because so much of what is a compelling voice, a complex voice, a constantly modulating voice, is the degree to which silence punctuates what you are reading. Silence is part of the actual voice of what you are reading. And when in my work, voice is so important. It's important to me to ask in the published form, can I be allowed this kind of white space? One thing about uh, the oral tradition, again, that I'll say is that it is not by its nature a push and glide treatment of language. It is a push and push and push and push experience in which you are in a moment and then you are in another moment. You are in a sentence that is a moment, and then there is a silence. You are in a passage that is part of a moment more than it is a push and gliding towards some direction. So for me, that WTAW would allow me to have this white space was a way to honor what I felt was the nature of the work, and especially the nature of the voice of the work.
Well, and to me, it added to that dreamlike quality of the voice too. It gave that just those extra silences, and like I said, for people who have not read the book, it's between every paragraph. So
Mhm.
instead of indentations, you have white space, and it's really neat, and I thought it was wonderful, and I love the and it was funny because when I first got the book from Peg, and I just flipped, I just as you do, you just ruffle the
Uh-huh.
pages. I went, wait a minute, there's so it was great.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Jackie, do we want to maybe see if anybody has any comments or questions or?
Sure. We have a question that just came up if you want me to go ahead and ask you guys.
Sure.
This has been a wonderful discussion, by the way. Thank you so much. I've been just entranced listening. So we have a question from Lauren. Firstly, she says, thank you for a wonderful discussion, Mac. In a work like this, which is so voice driven, how do you approach revision and returning to the inner place of that voice at a later stage?
That's a great question because it seems to me that this is of a piece with the experimental question that Scott and I were talking about before. When you are following a voice, where it will sometimes go tonally is very questionable. Where you say, this is now tonally traveling into something that will feel potentially like a mere distraction in the work. And my own hope is that in revision, there is an increasing boldness that is possible if you actually feel good in general terms about the music of that language, to allow it to go into musical registers and to find sonic possibilities that are their own satisfactions. Again, if what you hope in a given sustained work like this particular one is something like a spell being cast, which is different again than constructing a set of thematic instructions or a set of meaning driven operations. If what you're hoping for is a deepening and deepening spell, um, then you have to, with each revision, trust what often seems counterintuitive, and and I hope that this is something that readers feel in the work, is that they often feel, as they read, carried into something that does not make sense, that shouldn't be where it's going. Um, Early in the book acknowledges Alice in Wonderland, and it does this quite consciously, by way of saying, remember that one of the primary pleasures of Alice in Wonderland is how often it travels into nonsense and the pleasures of nonsense, and away from what looked like some calculated observation into something that was both calculated and magical.
Thank you, Mac. That was a
Thanks for the
wonderful.
question, Lauren.
Of course. Yes, thanks, Lauren. There's a couple other comments that were just that they really enjoyed your reading, etc. Beautiful reading. That was from Diane. I don't.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks for being here.
It
My
looks
pleasure.
like Diane may want to ask a question in person. Is that right?
I do. I'm even going to reveal myself. Like,
Hi,
"Hello."
Diane.
Hi, how are you? I've been on Zoom all day, so I thought I would spare you. I don't even know how to word this question, Mac, but as I was listening to your excerpt, it was so bracing and almost liberating of a voice that wanted to just get right at past posturing or scoring points and just really let all the hate out, and like, and in the process, there's other layers there, but it made me think about writing a novel like this while language in the public sphere is so degraded and meaningless and predictable and performative and within 140 characters. And I was wondering if my context, being awash in all this, like all of you, and January 6th didn't happen. Yes, it did. We saw with our own eyes. If it adds even more power to my receipt of a character like that. But I guess my question for you is, how is writing a voice like that in the current context? Did it feel any different? You always seek to be powerful in the way you use language, but now it's almost like a revolutionary act to hear or read something that is just unvarnished in that way.
There's a reason this is named after a blues song. The title is One Kind Favor, and is named after Blind Lemon Jefferson's famous song that is given different titles. But the key line in it is, there's one kind favor I'll ask of you, please see that my grave is kept clean. And like many great blues songs, it is both a very deeply sad song, and deeply celebratory. And this is so characteristic of blues songs, in which someone is singing in a heart breaking tone about having lived this terrible, tough life, and having faced death, and singing in a way that is celebratory. It was a good tuning fork for me to say to myself, if this goes as far as you were just saying that it goes, can it carry both valences? The valence of here is my rage, and here is counterintuitively my great joy in being able to speak my rage. And this line, one kind favor I'll ask of you, please see that my grave is kept clean. One thing that many people forget about the tradition of lynching in the South is that lynching was not enough for the people who committed that horrific crime. Often, and there are many stories of it in the American South, they had a need to then desecrate the grave of the person, and to repeatedly desecrate the grave of the person they murdered. So these are the kinds of things that the long, great, deep tradition of blues music has taught many of us. And then the question is, are we in any moment equal to the depths of that? Thanks for the question, Diane. It's so
Thanks for
good.
that great answer.
Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you, Mac, and thank you, Diane. Catherine asked a question in the chat, and I also see that you unmuted yourself. Did you want to ask it personally, Catherine?
I did, because he sort of started talking about it while I was typing. So I got a bit of an answer.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, I couldn't really type fast enough, but you mentioned Lewis Carroll and nonsense. And I wanted to push you on a sort of a technical aspect of the wordplay, in that you hear it, you put these two words together, or in some fashion create a new word. You're doing it by ear, and do you reach a point where you go, it feels right to have one now, it feels like I've done too much? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Those portmanteau words that are so characteristic of Alice in Wonderland, and that are characteristic of many writers who are engaged in and have freed themselves into utter play and pleasure making and pleasure taking. And it seems to me that if you do not early in the work establish for the reader, these are part of the terms of this reading experience. If you don't like literature to go to these edges of just sheer play, this probably isn't the thing for you. And certainly when I reread it, and this is what has been published, is the result of at least 12 complete revisions of the book over the 5 years that it took me to write it. There was often the question, are you having more fun, Mac, than the reader will have with this? And so play and the sense of play in a given work has to do with the reader joining the work in this kind of pleasure making. I've said this before, I think it's true of me. At my best, I am very childlike in what I write. And at my best, I think what my work offers is the reader the chance to recover the child reader inside. And not to say, oh, here is a marvelous adult reading experience, but to say, when all is said and done and you're thinking after, why did I like this book or like any part of it? Perhaps it's because it can, at its best, offer you that chance to recover. Oh, I can be a child as I'm reading this. I can fully recover the child reader that still exists and lives in me. And so it is a great question. And one of the reasons it's a great question is that it goes to the matter of how much there is still for me to learn as a writer who talks like I know what the heck I'm doing, but who does know anyway that he's involved in pleasure making and pleasure taking. Thanks so much, Catherine.
Thank you for the great questions, everyone. That was wonderful. We're getting close to 8 o'clock. Do you and Scott have anything you want to finish up with, Mac?
Well, Scott, I did want to say that this was particularly satisfying to me to be in conversation with you. I do want to say to all of you who set aside this time to attend this event that it means the world to me, that the occasion of this book, my 8th published book, is a very important moment in my life. And you remind me that when I go in the morning to write tomorrow, that I'm ostensibly alone, but I'm not at all alone. You care about my work. You've shown me that you care about my work. And I thank you, heart and soul. I thank you. And thank you, Scott, and thank you, Jackie.
Well, Mac, we thank you. for those of you that are on the call that have not read the novel, you can order a copy through Hub City. And if there was ever a time when you needed to support indie bookstores, it's now. So I think Jackie just put the link up maybe. And so if you're have an inkling to purchase it, please do. And for the Warren Wilson people who are on the line there, I want to say that I didn't get to it, but Mac does indeed have a playlist for this book, following his great DJ tradition of being the music master. All
you'd have to do is ask me and I'd email it to you.
Yeah. But it's a great playlist, by the way. It's fantastic. But anyway, Mac, I just want to thank you so much. This was a great experience, and I appreciate Peg asking me to do this. It's great to see your face again. I'm just down the mountain in Greenville. Let's meet somewhere, have coffee. We'll talk about memory and comedy. And
I'd love that.
And the bears, the big aggressive bears that you say you have outside in your yard now. We can talk about anything, and I would love to get together sometime.
I would too. And all of you, I hope I'll see you soon.
Thank you both so much for being here. You guys just were a pleasure to listen to, and
Thanks,
I
Jackie.
couldn't have enjoyed it more. And I really hope that people take the interest that your book deserves.
Thank you,
And
Jackie.
also, anyone who orders a copy from Hub City, Mac has generously provided us with book plates that actually match the cover art of the book, which he designed. So just wanted to throw that out there, that Mac made the cover design himself, and we love it. So I think we'll say goodnight, everyone, for now, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Enjoyed it very much.
Thank Diane. Good to see you.
Thank you.
You too. Be well.
Thanks, Catherine. Good to see you too.
Good to see you.
Good friends.
All right. You guys okay if I go ahead and end the meeting?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Matt,
Then.
great to see you, my friend.
Good seeing you, Scott.
I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thanks again for both of your time.
Thanks,
Thanks
Jack.
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.